All right, well, let's jump back on the lines and talk to Jamie in Texas. Jamie, you've got some thoughts on purity culture. What's on your mind tonight?
Thanks for taking my call again. And yeah, it's another culture shock. Now, I'm not saying that the UK has a perfect relationship with sex and sexuality. We've still got problems with LGBT issues, and there's the horrific rise of transphobia again. Thank you, JK. But things like abstinence-only sex education or general squeamishness around about sex or seeing it as a sin never really factored into my youth or anyone else's youth that I knew, partially because we're a very secular society. Church of England, not quite so proselytizing as some of the other denominations, and just a more robust sexual education system. I was in school in the 90s, so and one of the important things that we did, at least in my school system that I was in, was that the girls and the boys attended all of the sex ed classes. We weren't segregated, so when they did the big talk about periods and tampons and pads, I was there asking, what's a digital tampon? Because I thought it had a clock on it. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess more so that I am surprised by the notion of a trans Jesus, I think I'm a little shocked to find out that all of the Monty Python movies I've watched about British sexuality may have been misleading. I guess I'm curious about your experience of purity culture here in the States, because while these notions that we're talking about, as we've been discussing, are historical and tied to Christianity and, span the globe in many ways, there's a very particular evangelical brand that we've cultivated here. Have you had much interaction with that, Jamie?
Not insofar as personally, but it definitely permeates the news. It permeates a lot of the discourse around media. As you've seen, the blow up about stuff like She-Hulk and other shows that are more inclusive or female empowering. I'm not saying that UK folks don't weigh in on those. I mean, Andrew Tate is English and he's just the worst, but like the whole, women should be subservient and women feeling lustful or wanting dudes is sort of like seen as taboo unless you're over 40 and then the Diet Coke advert, basically. Whereas in the UK, we had TV programs on network on terrestrial TV, like the basic 5 channels, not even cable. Right. Now they're on late night, obviously, but they were still happily shown. There was one called Eurotrash, which was hosted by Jean-Paul Gaultier and I forgot the other guy's name, but they used to go around and like interview dominatrixes and talk about like dildo conventions and stuff. And we even had sex-based game shows, which were a little bit cheesy and a little bit cringy, but they were also completely honest, Right. Kind of like the his and hers game, but instead of asking, like, what's his favorite meal? It's like, what's your favorite sexual position? So what do you think his favorite sexual position is? And they have to guess. It's like, oh, they're very compatible and that kind of thing. So while we had a little bit of a giggly, behind the hand, like, he, isn't sex funny kind of thing, it was never like, das ist verboten. You must not even think about the bums and the willies and the bagooners because you can't have any of that. It's bad.
Right. JB, yeah. Can I share a story really quickly here? I was also raised in like North American. I like to say not just American because I am Canadian, and I was fully indoctrinated into purity culture. And I spent a time on a missionary team, and although we had trained to go to a different country, like in the global South area, but we ended up going to England and because of something going on with the government, whatever, we didn't end up going to where our original destination was. So we ended up spending 8 weeks in the UK doing missionary work.
Mm-hmm.
Wild. But I remember having my own culture shock because I had gone from this Canadian, very like, abstinence only. I was only 18 at the time, I think, when I did this team, and being met with the very secular culture in the UK, whether it was, sharing my thoughts about, my views on marriage and abstinence only and these ideas that I had been taught about sexuality, or if I was sharing the gospel, I very much was met with this like apathy or even a bit of like ridicule for like why I was being so intense about it. And like for me that carries on to the further story of my deconversion, because I was shocked by the amount of just that I was being the weird one, I guess. Being this 18-year-old who was still a virgin and like, trying to speak to these other youth in high schools and like youth groups about my views coming from North America, being somebody who was raised in, reading I Kiss Dating Goodbye and like When Boy Meets Girl and these really common Christian books that were almost scripture at the time. So I'm just relating to you that, yeah, it was very different. I don't know if it was just the church culture at the time, because I don't necessarily think that in Canada anyway, that the sex education was any different necessarily at the time. It was just very basic and, focused on safety more than anything. But the church culture at the time in North America was very much skewed towards this extreme purity and abstinence, even to the point of like saving your first kiss to your wedding day. Like this is the kind of ideas that were taught to me. So I'm just relating to you in the opposite. I am Canadian and I went to the UK, and I was surprised that the youth there weren't as strict as we were.
I was rather shocked my first time in Mexico to see softcore, but like still pornography right there on broadcast TV late at night. And I think people in America, I say we Americans as I talk to the two of you, we Americans, the royal we, I think we often don't realize just how much Hollywood and our influence over sort of global media can shape the global conversation around, what is acceptable with regards to violence, what is acceptable with regards to sexuality, and just the notion that your media, your TV diet wouldn't necessarily fit your culture is honestly, I think, a little challenging for most Americans.
That's a whole other conversation, Christy. There is the influence that the U.S. has on the rest of the world. Speaking as America's little brother up here in Canada, we follow everything that you guys do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, the media thing definitely is an aspect. And I also find that now watching media that is American or is based on American stories, like sex is still seen as naughty, like it's like more taboo. But then breaking that taboo is more extreme, and it's sort of like sex is seen as more monumental, maybe less sort of humdrum and everyday. Whereas in England it's a little bit more mundane. I mean, I've recently gotten into, I know it's an anime, but it's based on a Western story by a Western creator, cyberpunk, Mike Pondsmith, and the whole genre of cyberpunk, very sexually charged, extremely horny, and as a direct backlash against societal pressures, especially in the 80s and 90s, spectre of death, AIDS, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So when American media, at least as I can see it, tackles sex until relatively recently, or sexuality, it tends to go like foot to the floor. Absolutely, we can't just have a bit of a naughty joke or a bit of a sex. It's got to be like all over the place. It's incredibly sexualized, or there's nothing at all. It's completely chaste. And the one place, and I'll just end with this, the one place in American culture where more healthy and more approachable visions of sexuality and gender is in your cartoons and your kids' media. My Little Pony, She-Ra, what's one with the gems? Steven Universe.
Oh, Steven Universe.
All kinds of stuff. And I love that. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's a reason why you know the names of those shows, right? Because many of them are created ostensibly for a more childlike audience, but there's obviously a intentionality and a desire by those creators to put them in front of an adult audience, and people rally around them because of their exceptionness to the rule, like their ability to meaningfully depict some of these ideas.
So I'm hoping at some point that we see a transition for actually adult-centered media in America to push back against purity culture in the more gentle fashion, like a delightful PG rom-com where the protagonists just both happen to be dudes and they're doing the same thing. Oh no, mother-in-law's coming over for Hanukkah. Oh, what shall we do? But it's just two dudes instead.
Yeah, we have tried very terribly, and I have very little hope. But I guess we'll just keep going after it. Thank you so much for your call, Jamie.
Right.